Welcome to Book Banter with me, your host, Dianne Burkhart. I hope you will join me every Wednesday as we explore all things to do with, well, books. Let's get on with our show today. Hello, my happy people. Thank you so much for joining us during our holiday break. Season 1 of Book Banter with Dianne Burkhart has already ended, and during our hiatus, we are replaying some of our most popular interviews with fabulous guests that appeared during the first season of our show. We will be picking up Season 2 beginning February 1st. I hope you'll join us. Until then, enjoy this rebroadcast. Hello, my happy people. Have we got a great show for you? Thank you for joining us today, November 30th, 2022. I am so excited about this. We have got so much to cover. Things have been just going crazy the last week. You know, I was getting ready to go to Bolton in the UK for the She Inspires Awards because I was a finalist for the Shiro Award. We'll get to that at the end of the show. Before I left on that trip, though, I got a call from the publicist for Sonali Dev. You know, I was gushing about her not too long ago, and I was probably pronouncing her name wrong in the last show, but her name is Sonali Dev, and she wrote The Vibrant Years, which actually comes out tomorrow. There's been a lot of advanced copies, and oh my gosh, it is already just exploding. This is an interview you're going to want to settle in for and just relax and listen to the whole thing because she is fantastic, her book is fantastic, and you're going to want to hear about it. Now, be sure and stay until the very end, and I'll tell you what happened in Bolton at the She Inspires Awards. If you have not checked out their website yet, please do so. It is a fantastic experience. The event is just amazing. The charity work and the cultural work and community work that this organization does is phenomenal. You really need to check them out. But let's get on with my interview today because it is so good. I know I totally fangirled all over Sonali, and I should probably try to be a little bit more professional. But honestly, the reason that I did was because I was just so surprised by her book. I do not typically read romance books. That's not my preferred genre. And this one hooked me and kept me interested and wanting more until the very last page. I'm already looking at her other catalog of books because she has 9 books out, with this one coming out tomorrow, and she's already working on the 10th. So there are plenty of books for you to be checking out with her, but you really need to look at The Vibrant Years. It's incredible. If you know someone who loves romance books, buy them this book for Christmas. They will love you. If you know someone who is not into romance books, but just loves a well-crafted book with vivid characters that you can relate to, buy them this book. You may turn them on to the romance genre. No matter what, if you know somebody who just loves to read a good, well-developed story, buy this book. Okay, and I want to be very clear. I am not getting paid for any promotion. I have not been paid to do PR for her. This is just honestly my opinion about this book. And I read all the time, but I have not gotten this excited about a book in I don't even know how long. So it's really hard for me to contain myself because I just loved it that much. And that's just a personal opinion. But enough about this. Let's get in with the interview. And you're probably going to laugh at me because I was just so excited to talk to her about the book that I kind of did my interview a little bit backwards. So you'll hear whenever we try and actually start from the beginning in the middle of the interview. So sit back, enjoy, and I will come back at the end of the interview and tell you about the She Inspires Awards in Bolton, UK. So here we are. Please help me welcome to my show, Sonali Dev.
Hi, so nice to meet you.
So nice to meet you too. I have so been looking forward to this.
That's great. Thank you.
I just wanted to go ahead, for those who don't know who you are, to give like a good quick background, cover some of your earlier books that you have out, and some of the achievements that you've had, and then spend the majority of the time talking about the vibrant years and really hitting home that it comes out on the 1st and it would be a fantastic Christmas present.
I mean, it really would, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's
And
such a happy book, but yeah. When
well,
you, I mean, I keep trying to tell people that, and then I feel a little bit like a market.
I will be more than happy to drive that home for you because honestly, I do not read these kinds of books. I read for escapism. I read fantasy and like vampires and werewolves and weird things that have nothing to do with reality. I read for escape. So I never pick up books that are about like actual interpersonal relationships. I don't read romance. And the only reason I read this was because your publicist contacted me about this interview and sent it to me. And so I was going to read it so I could intelligently discuss it with you. And oh my God, I was hooked by page 4. I am not
Wow,
even
thank
kidding
you.
because
Thank
just your style, the colorful language and the interpersonal relationships, it drew me in. And I found something that I could identify with every single one of your main female characters. I
Thank
mean,
you. I love to say that this book is basically everything I've ever wanted to say about being a woman. And I
mhm.
think that that's a pretty universal thing, you
Oh,
know.
it totally resonates.
Thank you. It is, and I'm hearing this from, women certainly across America and across the world who are feeling that way. And so I have rarely ever met a woman who doesn't share, that push and pull between what's expected of us and personal freedom. And I
Yeah.
think that that's the essential female journey. And I think that, this book speaks to that a lot, as I think a lot of my writing does. That's, if I had to identify a central theme of all my work, that would be it. It's this journey of finding yourself under all this conditioning and under all this expectation. We are, from the day we're born, kind of told what we need to be for everyone else.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I think that, finding ourselves inside of that without losing our community is the fundamental feminine journey. And I do think that that's at the heart of all my novels.
I know growing up, I was taught you need to learn how to cook, you need to learn how to clean, you need to learn how to sew, all of these things to be a good wife and mother.
Yeah.
And
And the fact that you have to be a good mother first above
mhm,
all else, and and a good wife and a good daughter, and a good girlfriend, and all of that. That's the first thing, that we don't exist if we don't do these things well, which is be these roles.
exactly. And I was actually, whenever I first started telling people I wanted to go to college and have a career, they're like, "Why? Why don't you just get married and have kids?" That's what people around here do. Why do you want to go get college? And I actually didn't get married until I was 46 and went to college and got a couple of degrees. Before that,
Yeah.
I was the odd one out.
Yeah, the kind of middle class or upper middle class privileged Indian experience, the way I grew up, was a little bit different, where we were expected to be all of it. Like in my family, there was no question. My grandmother was a medical doctor. And so there was no question of not going to college or not having a career. It is, what do you want to be, not if, you're
Mhm.
going to go to college. But that didn't in any way detract from all the other stuff.
Yeah.
So I always joke when I had young children and I went to bed exhausted out of my mind every night, that I was expected to have my father's incredibly successful career and be a domestic goddess like my mom,
Hmm.
when those two only did their pieces.
Yeah.
And I have always had the expectation from myself, and everyone around me has always had the expectation from me, that I would be both those things and be them spectacularly. And I don't think that this is that this is a unique experience in any way. So even if you were expected to do one of those two things, that right there is an expectation, right? I mean, you were
Hmm.
told what you were supposed to do. Not that everyone isn't, but you've made that journey to figure out what it is that you want outside of what you've been told you have to be.
I think that was one reason why the characters from your book just really got to me was I just saw so much of everything in there. But I've kind of done this a little bit backwards here. I do want you to explain just who you are and, just a little bit of what you would like people to know about you.
Wow, it's been 9 books with me trying to figure that out. And I'm writing my 10th one now. But I am Sonali Dev, and I was born and raised in India, in Mumbai, particularly Bombay, when I was young. And I have now spent more time in America than I did in India. So half of my life has been evenly split in terms of time. I identify very strongly with both my cultures.
Mhm.
I own my Americanness and my Indianness fully. I feel like it is one of the best combinations in terms of the old and the new, and a culture that's community focused versus a culture that is self focused. And all those things, personally, for me, I think are such a perfect fit that I think that's a huge definition of my identity. As I said, The Vibrant Years is my 9th book. I sold my first book almost exactly a decade ago, and my first book came out about 8 years ago. And so I have done this for a bit. And when I started, we were in a place where there was almost nothing that looked like my books on the shelves.
Mhm.
And publishing, media, the world around us in this past decade has changed almost beyond recognition. It was when I started out trying to be published, almost unimaginable that we would, that what is happening now might even start to happen. I do believe we have a long ways to go, but I think we've come to a point that was really hard, at least for me, to imagine 10 years ago. I hoped for it with all my heart and worked really hard so that it might happen. And so I'm really glad that we're here, where, across the world, in Germany, you're interviewing me about this book, with 3 generations of Indian women. So I think, as far as my books, what I'm trying to do is try to give readers a gamut of emotions, because I feel reading is the safest way to leave your body and experience humanity. And I think that the definition of having lived is having felt and having,
Mhm.
had experiences outside of yourself. And reading is the safest way to do it. You called it escape when we first started talking, but it's leaving your own experience, right? Whether you're leaving it to get into darker experiences in a safe way, or even happier experiences,
Yeah.
so that you might believe that they can actually happen. So reading, at a deep conditioning level, is able to reach parts of us that other things can't reach. And it's probably one of the best ways to internalize an experience outside of yourself, especially fiction. I think more than nonfiction does that. And so one part of what I try to do when I write is to take my readers inside human experience and inside understanding what a space they might not normally have stepped into,
Yeah.
and to really feel that. So to laugh and to cry and to come out, maybe even a little bit moved or changed in some way.
Now, before I was approached by your publicist, I had not read any of your books. So I thought I should get to know you a little bit better before we do this interview. So I checked out your website. And I did notice that you have been writing for quite a bit longer than just when you've been publishing books, because you wrote something when you were 8.
Yes, I think I actually started to write before I read. And by that, I don't mean pen to paper, but I was telling stories, even before I could read. My father loves to tell people how his other child and other kids, when they go to bed, parents say, all right, bedtime, story time. And when he tucked me in at night, I was the one who said, Papa, I'm going to tell you a story. So, so
That's
I
great.
told my dad stories when I was, so I was writing, I think even before I was reading. So I do not ever remember a time when telling stories, playing with words was not something that was absolutely an essential part of who I am. And even, another funny story my mom likes to tell is that when I was doing my math homework in kindergarten, instead of doing my workbook, I was making little couplets, these little poems about the cover of the math textbook. And instead of yelling at me, my mom called her sisters and bragged about it, which kind of explains how my life went.
That
But
is
yeah,
so
so
great.
it's been part of my entire life. I don't know myself outside of a person who likes to express opinions, tell stories, make up stuff, and reach people.
I noticed that you had a couple of audio recordings on your site too. And so I checked out your keynote speech from the Romance Writers of America Librarians Day from 2018. And I think that is one of the things too that really had me excited about talking to you because first of all, you have a fantastic sense of humor whenever you were, congratulating them for their huge brass ovaries. I actually laughed out loud whenever I heard that. But
Thank
more
you.
than that, at the end, when you were calling them to task, that they had to be responsible and be part of the solution for being more inclusive for books that are on the shelves, that they needed to start picking more books from authors of color, from women, from people who were not straight, not able bodied, not cisgendered, all of these groups that are marginalized and not heavily represented needed to be on their shelves. And you did not hold back. I loved that.
Thank you.
I think we need to have more people voicing that, standing up for that. And stories are more interesting when they're not exactly like you, when it opens you up to new things. And I think there are too many people who feel comfortable reading about people who are exactly like them. But to me, I find that boring.
Yeah, same here. I mean, even when I'm reading white American literature, the authors that call to me are the ones who get into the specifics, right? Because New England culture is not the same as the South. All of the South is not identical. You
Mm-hmm.
know, the West Coast, Colorado, if you are going to take me on a journey, now, the human experience remains the same, but immersing myself in a place, in a time, in a culture that is different from mine is it's just a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing to find that the absurd things that my mom says to me are exactly the same absurd things in a slightly different way that a woman living in New Mexico has her
Mm-hmm.
mom say to her. So there is that, understanding yourself. And I think the specificity of culture, the detail is really what roots me inside stories. And when I try to separate, when I think about what are the stories that I remember decades after I've read them, as opposed to a story that was fun enough when I read it, but the next week, if you ask me, what did you read? I have to actually scratch my head and think about it. The
Yeah.
difference between those two is the specificity of the world, of the culture, is really understanding that and falling into it. And that's because of that travel, because I'm getting to travel, through those details. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's kind of, I think, the richest part of reading. So I completely agree with you that it's almost, I mean, it is a mix of both things. You need to see yourself in books and in media. And on the other hand, you have to mix that up with seeing others,
Mm-hmm.
right? So your shoes have to be represented and other shoes have to be represented so you can walk in those. And that's the gamut of human experience that I was, talking about. And as far as calling the librarians out, when you think about it, what I was saying 10 years ago, there was really nobody telling me and other authors like me. And by that, I mean authors of color, authors of, varying genders and sexualities. There was everybody was telling us that no one wanted to hear our stories.
Mm-hmm.
They were trying to do it kindly, which is what is so interesting because we've been trained to accept norm, right? And it was easy to sell norm because for 200 years, this is what was being seen, and neutrality was being sold, and it was easy for those in power. And then those in power, the gatekeepers in publishing, felt, nothing stopped them from saying to us, look at the numbers, look at the numbers, look at what people are reading. But people are reading what you have made available to them, what you have
Exactly.
trained them to read for 200 years plus. And now, literally, we get this kind of thrown, all authors, all creators get numbers and business thrown in our face. and then you add a multiplying factor of no precedent, right? Of nothing that has come before us that we can step on. And so you're literally creating space, and you're creating, you're breaking through walls, all the terrible cliches and metaphors.
Mm-hmm.
But we were very easily told that our stories were not needed, even when it was wrapped in sweet words of, oh, of course we'd want it. Of course, this is what we'd like, but look at the numbers. And I heard this from librarians all the time. And, there is the other side of it, which is that I owe a lot of my early just getting in the hands of readers to the work of librarians, right? So I'm not saying that all across the board, that's what librarians do or anything. They're extremely essential in making this change. But what was happening was that they were being told, this is your demographic, this is what your readers check out, right? But without the other side of it, which is that you don't have a large enough collection for your readers to choose from that doesn't look like everything they've always chosen, right?
And if it's not available, how are they going to choose it?
Yeah, and that's one piece of it. And if only one thing is available, then how is that one thing going to meet the needs of all your readership? And then you're going to use that one thing to extrapolate an entire possibility of a collection. But I think a lot has been said about this over the past decades, and a lot of work is being done. And finally, we're starting to see at least some movement. And I'm so grateful for that.
Exactly. Me too.
Thank you.
Say, as somebody who is Native American and handicapped, I'm very grateful that people are starting to wake up to things like those.
Absolutely, yes.
I was looking through your catalog of books that you already have available, and I have to ask, are you a Jane Austen fan?
What gave it away?
I love these titles, Incense and Sensibility, Recipe for Persuasion, and my favorite is The Pride and Prejudice and Other Flavors. That is the book that I'm going to be buying next, because something about that title, I want to know how flavors play into that.
Yeah, it's a gender flip these are not really retellings. So to speak to your question about Jane Austen, I read her very young. I read her in middle school. I credit her with not just being a literary influence, but I think with the influence that made me who I am today.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't like me, take it up with Jane Austen. she helped me believe, she reinforced a lot of things I naturally believe about myself, about what the world should be like. She laughed at the world she lived in while still living in it. And, that made it really easy to laugh at the absurdity in our own world. And so ever since I was a little girl, I kind of rewrote her and retold her stories in my context anyway for many, many years. But once I started to take my writing seriously, then I knew that her stories have been told and retold in beautiful ways by very many, very talented writers. What I wanted to do was pay homage to the lessons I learned from her about being human and about the world. So these are really thematic homages to her work.
Very quickly here, I want to tell everyone some of the other titles in your book collection. A Bollywood Affair, The Bollywood Bride, The Wedding Setup, and The Emma Project. But these are all ones that you've had out before, and you have a new one coming out December 1st.
Yes. So I'm going to go back and reframe that a little bit. So my 4 Austen books are my favorite 4 Austen novels, and the Emma Project is part of that. So it's Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors, Recipe for Persuasion, Incense and Sensibility, and the Emma Project, which obviously is Emma. And then I had a set of 4 books before that, which I call the Bollywood series, which are written in this style of big, emotional, over-the-top Bollywood film. And one of the protagonists works in the Hindi language Indian film industry, which is popularly known as Bollywood. That's why that series is that. Now, The Wedding Setup is a short story that came out early this year. And the one that comes out on the 1st of December is The Vibrant Tears, which I'm incredibly excited about, and which happens to be the first book to launch Mindy Kaling's new publishing imprint, which is Mindy's Book Studio. So that's a huge, huge honor.
Yeah, I was wanting to ask you, how did you get connected with Mindy's Book Studio?
It's one of those things where we say hard work meets opportunity
Hmm.
and being in the right place at the right time. So when I wrote The Vibrant Years, I had absolutely no idea Mindy Kaling was out there looking for books or looking to start a publishing imprint or anything like that. I wrote this book, however, in the vein of Mindy's own writing, which is
Hmm.
laugh out loud funny,
Yes.
really looking at vulnerabilities and things that make us cringe, but also that kind of show a very human part of us and are very real in terms of emotion. So she does that really well. And I've kind of studied that for years in her writing. That did influence this book, but I had absolutely no idea. At the very same time, she happened to be looking for a book to launch her imprint, and she was obviously looking for the same things. And it was a matter of being in the right place at the right time, and I couldn't have asked for better, especially because I'm such a big fan.
Yeah, definitely. She is an incredible talent. I mean, she was on The Office. She's a comedian, screenwriter, producer, writes her own books. Now she's a book publisher. I swear, if she has a fantastic singing voice, I'm going to have to hate her because that would be too much talent in one person.
Or if she paints.
Exactly.
But yeah, her writing on The Office, I think, is some of the most spectacular work I've ever seen. So
Yeah. She was just
it,
incredibly talented. And I have to say, it's like I would think, being the very first book coming out from her publishing house would be a little bit of pressure. But I was looking at Amazon today, and well, actually, I looked at it last night and I checked it again today to see if there was any difference. The Vibrant Years has not even published yet and already has a 4.4 out of 5 rating with, let's see, yesterday it had 2,149 reviews. And when I checked it again today, it had already gone up another 162 reviews in less than 24 hours. You are sitting at number one in friendship fiction in books and Kindle, number 5 in women's domestic life fiction, and number 47 overall in the Kindle store. And it hasn't even released yet. How does that
poof,
make you feel?
um, a little bit, it's a little bit surreal. But I do really, really love this book. And what's more important than all these numbers, they are amazing, is
Hmm.
the details of what people who are loving the book are saying about it. And it seems to be exactly the thing you and I were talking about, which is that a lot of women are seeing themselves in it and really relating. And the humor, which is the escape that we were talking about, I think we live in times when a good laugh, and I'll go back to what, one of the seeds when I started to write this book, I was hungry to write something really funny. And that was because, we were just starting to come out of the pandemic. And I think I survived the pandemic in the way that I did because I completely lost myself in comedy. I pulled up all my binging, everything I read. It helped me survive that laugh, that being able to see the absurdity, the cringe, all the things that make us laugh at ourselves,
Hmm.
and refocused my mind on what is delightful about life and what is fun about life. And so I knew, because comedy saved me through the pandemic, I knew that's what I wanted to bring to my readers now. I have written some pretty dark books, but there's always been wit and humor in all my books. But I knew that I wanted to write things where I wanted you to scream with laughter at least once in the book. And I think that it came from that place of honestly giving what I wanted. We are told constantly to write what we want to read, and this absolutely is that. And I
Hmm.
think that that to me is really important. I have gone in and read especially my better reviews because I'm a delicate flower like that. And I try to avoid the bad ones. All the power to anyone who doesn't like it. we're not cheap and we can't all like the same books. But for people who it has connected with and people who have loved it, I just love what they have to say. And that's the most beautiful thing. And that gives me hope for the longevity of, this wonderful moment I feel like I'm having, because I think what I set out to do is hitting the mark that I set out to hit, which is to make people laugh and feel seen and feel okay in their skin.
Definitely. That's how it came across for me when I read it. Now, why
Yay.
don't you tell us what is the Vibrant Years?
It is the story of three generations of women out on the modern dating scene at the exact same time. So it's a grandmother who is 65, and this is a hot grandma who is taking her new retirement community by storm. Her daughter-in-law, who has been working really hard to make a name, make a place in television anchoring in Florida and coming up against all sorts of roadblocks. And the granddaughter, who is a 20 something coding genius, who has suffered from anxiety her whole life. But when she was 16, she wrote an app to help herself that matches your spiraling thoughts and your mood and what is happening to you physiologically with music and chants. And so she wrote this very young to help herself, but it is now used by millions of people around the world to help them survive, to help live a better life. And it's incredibly important to her. So, of course, she's a prodigy and she's a very special young person, but she is about to lose that. A lot of the people who rely on it are about to lose access to the app. And so, to save her app, she pitches in a panic another app to her investors. And this is a dating app that's based in self-discovery. And so when she does that, she has never dated in her life. And so she needs to very quickly understand what the dating apps that exist. She needs to research them. And so she ropes in her 65-year-old widowed grandmother and her 47-year-old divorced mom to help her research dating apps. So that's the general framework of the story. But it really is a journey of these women learning how to live life on their own terms, because now as women, and I think that the modern dating scene is such a great metaphor, an allegory for where women have come in terms of the choices they can make, how they can live, lack of taboos, all of that, right? Because how my daughter dates and how my grandmother dated, there is literally centuries between that, right? Emotionally, it's a whole different paradigm. And so it's a really great place, I thought, to explore how far women have come and what that means for our life in real terms, we have all these choices, but what has it made easier and what has it made harder? And what does that say about us actually living lives on our own terms now?
And I have to say, I loved the dates that you gave them from the dating services, because that's how I met my husband, was on a dating website. But I had many dates before I met him that were not, well, let me just say they were memorable in the wrong way.
And you know what, honey, you are not unique in that, which is
Yeah.
exactly where this comes from. People ask me all the time where it comes from, and I have been married now for 26 years, so it's been a while for me. But my closest friends have been doing this for a while, from the
Hmm.
very first versions of dating apps to now. And I swear this is one thing where fact is definitely stranger than fiction. You could
Yeah.
not. So when I sat down to write this, the stories I had heard for years and years and years, there was nothing I could come up with that could be more bizarre than what actually happens.
Yeah.
That is, that's the absolute truth. And I think every woman or person
Hmm.
who's been on a dating app or knows someone who is, there is no way that you could think that this is too bizarre, and yet it's so darned bizarre.
So yeah, I was laughing so hard when I was reading those parts because I'm just like, yeah, that would happen. That could happen.
Oh my gosh, I had so much fun with it, I will say. I had so much fun with those scenes, and I still crack myself up. My husband will watch me when I was doing my revisions. He's saying, "How many times have you read that book?" And I said, "At least 100 times by that point." And he's like, "How are you still laughing?" I said,
Because it's
"It's
still
so darn
funny.
funny." Yes.
Would you have time to maybe read a little portion of your book?
All right, here it goes. The Vibrant Years. Chapter 1. Bindu. The way a woman wears the color red tells you everything you need to know about how she sees herself. The first time I saw Bhanu, she was wearing a red bikini. From the Journal of Oscar Set. It wasn't every day that someone left you $1 million without so much as a warning and no way to give it back, no matter how badly you wanted to. For years, Bindu Desai had believed that life was a series of accidents waiting to happen. Fragile beads strung together on threads of varying strengths. The only way to keep them from shattering was to stand utterly still and hold them as carefully as she possibly could. Then, 26 years ago, her husband had died, 2 days after Bindu's 39th birthday. And she swore to take them off and move, dance. She didn't care if the beads shattered. She was going to live. But everyone in her neighborhood in Mumbai knew her. Mrs. Bindu Desai, wife of Dr. Rajendra Desai, mother of Ashish Desai, who was studying engineering somewhere in America. Sure, her choice to keep wearing bright colors as a new widow was met with tolerant smiles. But when she wore her Western blouses and pants outside the house instead of her usual salwar kameez, the women in her building had started to avoid her, especially if she dropped in on them after the husbands got home from work. Turned out, moving, dancing wasn't quite so simple, because all her friends were still wearing their fragile beads. Then her son announced that he was getting married to a woman he'd met at the University of Florida. They'd been in love for 3 years. Ashish had told Bindu about Alicia in confidence, because his father would never be okay with his son marrying a Catholic girl, even if she was Indian. Well, Indian American. Alicia's parents were from Goa, but she had grown up in America. Being from Goa herself, Bindu felt like she'd won some special intraparental prize when Ashish had chosen a wife from her hometown. Too bad Rajendra would never know that she had won that marital contest. He'd also never know that because he'd died and left Bindu alone, she'd been free to move to America and move in with Ashish and Alicia when they had Kali while still in grad school and needed help raising her. Some accidents were actually beautiful. Her daughter-in-law was one of Bindu's favorite people on earth. Sure, she was a bit, how could Bindu put this delicately, uptight? One of those people who always had to do the right thing. But Bindu didn't mind. She liked when people felt free to be who they were. After Ashish and Alicia had gotten divorced 2 years ago, after 23 years of marriage, Bindu had chosen to go on living with her daughter-in-law. For one, Alicia had asked her to. For another, Bindu now moved and danced to her own tune, at least as best as she could, which at 65 was not unworthy of pride. That didn't mean every once in a while she wasn't livid enough at her daughter-in-law to want to drown her in their neighborhood pool. This morning, they'd had one of those fights, triggered by something so insignificant that halfway through you forgot what had started it. Well, an empty chai cup had started it. Bindu had left the blameless thing on the coffee table, preoccupied as she was with the unexpected $1 million. Why on earth would anyone leave such an obscene sum to a woman whose life he'd almost destroyed? What had he possibly hoped to gain, other than digging up old pain and secrets? Ever since the money had shown up, Bindu had felt like she'd been hit by a truck, one filled with every shameful mistake of her youth. Alicia had snapped at Bindu in her passive-aggressive way about not using a coaster, probably preoccupied with some new stunt her bully of a boss had pulled. "It's a table, Alicia. It doesn't have feelings, and it's ugly anyway," Bindu had snapped back. The coffee table was a gift from Alicia's mother, which explained why it was ugly and why it needed so very much care. If Bindu had her way, she'd only ever buy furniture that one could dance on, with heels. Nonetheless, she shouldn't have said it, and from that moment on, things had snowballed out of control. Hurtful words were tossed about, fragile beads shattering one by one, until Bindu declared that she was going to the open house at the retirement community that Debbie Romano had been pestering her to accompany her to. Debbie lived a few houses down from the house Bindu shared with Alicia in Naples, Florida. For years, Bindu had been Debbie's walking buddy. They walked 5 miles every day, each committed to never missing a day. Over the past year, Debbie, who was 10 years older than Bindu, had turned repetitive in her conversation. Bindu responded by learning how to block out the parts she hadn't heard before. When you spend hours walking with someone, it might seem easy to confuse company with friendship, but Bindu didn't have that problem. Defining relationships and responding to them with exactly what they needed was one of her greatest skills. "Maybe it's time for me to move out," Bindu had said in the final throes of their nonsensical fight. Alicia had made one of her laugh, groan, scoff sounds. If not for that stupid sound, Bindu wouldn't have said yes to Debbie, and Bindu wouldn't be standing here in a red summer dress she'd bought online with nowhere to wear it to.
That is so good.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh my God. It's like, I want you to just keep reading the rest of the book.
Thank you.
I want to make sure that people realize that this book releases December 1st. That is Thursday. It will make a fantastic Christmas present for anyone on your list who loves to read. As I said at the beginning, this was not my typical genre, and I was hooked by page 4. So anybody who loves reading will love this book. I practically guarantee that. I'm going to put links in the podcast description so that people can find your website, learn more about you and your other books, and a buy link to pick up The Vibrant Years by Sonali Dev on Amazon.com, because you will want to do that. I cannot thank you enough for being on my podcast today. This has been fantastic, and I have loved talking to you.
Thank you so much, Dianne. It has been a pleasure, and I'm so glad I got to talk to you. Thank you to all your viewers for tuning in.
And I will be picking up Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors next, because I have to find out what this one is about.
Well, yay. I am pretty sure you're going to have fun.
With your sense of humor coming through in these books, I am positive I will enjoy this one too. Thank you so much, and look forward to the next book that you put out. So there you have it. That was my interview with Sonali Dev. It was just such a delight talking to her. I hope when her next book comes out, we can have her back to talk about that one. So don't forget, tomorrow, The Vibrant Years is available on Amazon, and you might want to check some of your other providers too. Now, I'm hoping that there's at least a few of you who are wanting to know what happened with the She Inspires Awards that I was at last Thursday. My husband and I traveled to Bolton, UK for the event, and it was just fantastic. It was at the Bolton Stadium Hotel in their premiere room. The event was just absolutely gorgeous. They had fantastic meal catered in. They had wonderful entertainment. They had photographers. They pulled out all the stops for this event. And the women who were there running the event, the ones being honored, all of the finalists in that room, It was possibly the greatest group of women I have ever had the privilege of getting to spend time with. These women are making such great strides in medicine and business, their personal lives, stepping up to take leadership roles in their community. It was just an incredible time. And I am so thankful to the person who nominated me for giving me this experience, because it is something that I'm always going to treasure. And I'm not just saying that because I won the category that I was nominated for. I was sitting there at my table with all of these people that I just met that night, and my husband was with me. And the way that they were presenting the awards, they would first start off telling a little story about the person who had won. And when they started telling my story, I just froze and looked at the man sitting next to me, not my husband, somebody else's companion. And I just looked at him and said, "Oh my God." And he just smiled and goes, "Is that you?" And all I could do was shake my head. I was so shocked, and it wasn't until they actually said my name that I believed that that was really me. I kept thinking, okay, maybe somebody just has a story similar to mine, which would be next to impossible because my story is so bizarre. But yeah, so they called my name, and I won the She Inspires Shero Award in the global category for 2022. And it has just been, I'm still speechless about the whole thing. I just keep looking at the award, not believing that it's in my house. It's fantastic, and it really means so much to me. And they had asked us to write a 1-minute speech, but due to time, they decided to cut out the speeches. And I was kind of thankful for that, because when I get too happy about something, I have at times had a neurological episode where it prevents me from speaking at all. I mean, seriously, I cannot utter a word. I never know when it's going to happen, so I was afraid that it might happen at this moment. So when they decided not to do the speeches, I was kind of thankful. But I do want to go ahead and share my speech here with you, because it really meant a lot to me. So this is my acceptance speech for the Shero Award in the global category. Thank you so much. I would not be here if it weren't for so many people in my life who stood by me at different points of my journey. My granny, Arlene Polk, my mom and dad, my husband, Pedro, who is up here with me right now in case I lose the ability to speak if I get too happy about this, because that has happened. I also need to thank everyone involved with She Inspires, including the person who nominated me, whoever you are. Thank you. When you live with serious, debilitating health issues like I do, people can start to avoid you. It's tough to watch someone deal with daily struggles, and it's understandable that people sometimes choose not to be there to watch you go through it. But it can start to make you feel invisible as a person. When you are only seen through the framework of your health issues and not as the person overcoming them every day. This award category is amazing because from the moment I was nominated, I felt truly seen as a person. And that is an amazing gift. I plan to use this award to further my platform as an advocate for others with neurological conditions and brain damage, and I will spend the rest of my life working to make others feel as seen as I do right now. Thank you. There, at least I get to have my speech here on my podcast, and I meant every word of that. I am so grateful, and I need to share this with so many people who have supported me in my life, including all of you who continue to regularly read my books, listen to my podcast, connect with me on social media. It means so much that you see me in these frameworks and not as the person who struggles every day to walk or talk or think of a complete sentence. Thank you for being here to support me in my goals as an author, as a podcaster, as a human. Thank you. So now I already have the next author interview set up, and I will tell you more about that in my Friday blog. Be sure to check that out at burkhartbooks.com. I'm going to have a TikTok video up here sometime this week where I actually show you my trophy and the very cool things that I got to bring home from the She Inspires trip. The things that they created to give away to the people who were there for this event were just so well done that they need to be seen. And now you know what time it is. It is time for all of you to go forth and buy the Vibrant Ears and then be really happy about it. Thank you for joining me today. Have a great week. Thanks for tuning in for this rebroadcast. Next week, we begin Season 2 of Book Banter with Dianne Burkhart. I don't know about you, but I can't wait. We're going to be bringing you all new interviews and fantastic new sound quality, I hope. And it's all because of you. Thank you so much for listening, and I will be here to talk to you next week. Please join us, and until then, go forth and be happy.